let's open up that can of worms. Let's go ahead and set the record straight. Is the idea of being super straight inherently transphobic, or is that a reactionary response?
I think we probably should define super straight first, but I will defer to Arden on this because I know Arden has been fighting this very, very much online the last couple of days.
Yeah. So, I think there's like a really important distinction to be made because the kind of intention of this whole super straight thing is, I believe I'm using this right, but it's kind of that Mott and Bailey thing where, they say, well, what? I can't be straight. I can't not like penis or something. And that's the implication they give, but that's not what the claim they're making is. The claim they're making is, I'm not attracted to trans women. And the thing about that statement is that trans women are an incredibly diverse group of people, equally as diverse as cis women. So to say that you are not attracted to trans women is a really absurd claim because it would require you to be able to detect trans women just by seeing them. And secondly, one thing that I really try to hammer home is it requires you to hold an irrational prejudice belief about trans people. Like, for example, they all have penises. I don't like penises, therefore I don't like trans women. When we know that that is untrue. Some trans women, can undergo bottom surgery, or perhaps they're, intersex or something. There's so many different iterations on these things that it's absurd to make a claim that I'm not attracted to a group of people that is that diverse without inherently holding some sort of prejudice about that group.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. The conversation I remember having about this the other day was somebody was like, well, why? Arden knows what I'm talking about. Someone was like, why can't I just ask this question? Like, what about saying I'm not attracted to trans women is transphobic? And my response essentially was, okay, explain to me how you are not attracted to all trans women. Why is that? All trans women, regardless of any physical characteristic or whatever, in a way that isn't bigoted. I'll wait. There was no response because, of course, there's no way to do that.
What's the only commonality, the singular thing that all trans women have in common other than being human beings?
Right. They're all trans. Ooh.
It's that they're, that's it.
It's like, come on. Like,
that's the only...
And the frustrating thing here is that people, the first couple of days of this, I think caught a lot of people off guard, and there was just like a lot of confusion around it. And then it started coming out that this was actually a concerted effort to start indoctrinating kids, essentially young teenagers, into fringe right-wing neo-Nazi groups by using this language and essentially turning the language of the woke LGBTQ plus people against them. And it was very obvious. It was like explicitly stated as a mission statement to do these things. And they were talking about it on a message board. It was some subreddit, 4chan, 8chan, whatever. And there were people who were like, stop talking about this. You know this is going to end up on Twitter and ruin the whole thing. So it was not ever and will not ever be an actual sexuality. This is a concerted effort to try and smuggle in a lot of really harmful right-wing fascist ideas using a common talking point that is in the media today.
Yeah, well, it's worth pointing out that this is really just another flavor of this sort of heteronormative, homophobic, like really toxic gender orientation, that you need to be on some extreme end of the dial, that you have to be, and you can't just be straight, you have to be super straight. You have to go all the way to that toxic extreme. And so it just makes me wonder what life would be like, what our culture would be like if we were all a little bit more uncomfortable embracing this notion that, everything does work on a spectrum, that we're all a little queer or a little straight, whatever that actually means. Does that idea mean much to the two of y'all? Was it anything that you experienced growing up?
Well, I know that I've had a lot of interesting conversations with my partner because, like, the terminology like gay, straight, homosexual, heterosexual is becoming increasingly like fluid, especially as we bring gender into the equation, which, you know, historically has not really been considered. It was very much around like, okay, you're either with somebody with the same parts or different parts, right? And so there is this ongoing metamorphosis in terms of language, I think, that we are going to have to look at all of these terms and see how we're actually using them and be aware of that, because otherwise all of this gets muddy and then people are able to smuggle in other terms that are actually harmful and we're not able to articulate why that's the case. So being very intentional with our language and making sure that we are constantly updating to make sure that we are speaking accurately about ourselves and each other, I think is going to be crucial to combat this kind of thing moving forward. I don't know, Arden, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my experience with, you know, sexuality was, there was a lot of confusion, especially as I was trying to figure out like my gender. You know, I definitely knew I was attracted to women. That was for sure. And I kind of had the sense that I was attracted to men, but that one was a lot more difficult to work through for me. I think being, you know, socialized as a boy growing up, I think there was a lot of shame associated with a lot of that stuff. But as I've started to undo those pieces, I kind of realized that like the gender of the person that I'm attracted to really plays almost no part. Like I might have, you know, like a frequency of being attracted to people who present a certain way more often, but when I see a hot person, I see a hot person. Like there's not really much more else to put into that piece, you know, and there shouldn't have to be. If we can acknowledge that there's no moral weight to being attracted to a person, regardless of their gender and your gender, then it should absolutely not matter the gender of the person that you're attracted to. Yeah.
No, that's been my experience as well. In fact, my own gender journey happened after I realized I was bisexual, which is the label that I've chosen. And I was like, okay, why am I attracted to both men and women? And more, I was like, it's not anything like biological in terms of like what their bodies can do. It's very much more about the individual person. And if that was the case, then why am I sorting them by men and women at all? And oh, there's this other thing that's not either of those. What is happening? Oh, that's me. Okay. So it was a very, very steady, like, I won't say slippery slope because the evangelicals will jump on that phrase, but it was essentially like, oh, gender is not the requirement for being interested in somebody. And because that was all that was ever talked about in that context, like nobody ever talked about sex or gender outside of, well, do you want to have kids with this person? So once I got rid of that component, I was like, oh, well, this concept doesn't even really serve me anymore. Why else would I even adhere to it?
Yeah, I'll just say for my own part, you know, this quote, this "everyone's a little queer" was a song lyric that I experienced in high school, and it totally broke down the walls for me. It let me know that I didn't need to be this like extreme end of the gender spectrum. And that was such a relief because I was so bad at it. Like I was just very, very bad at being a butch guy. And you know, I had no idea at the time, and I still don't entirely understand like exactly where that journey is taking me. But just having a little bit of freedom, you know, being told that everyone's a little queer. So if you are kind of a lot of queer, that's, you know, still on the same spectrum.
Right.
I mean, I think that if we just can get that message out that nobody is really like a 1 or a 0. Nobody is 100% anything, that, you know, life, that human beings don't fit into checkboxes and that we are all somewhere on a giant continuum, then we can find a place to draw that line that actually fits us and that works for us.
Absolutely. And I know that we are going to talk very specifically around toxic gender after this, but we do have quite a few calls. Christy, do you have any more talking points on this particular super straights issue? Because we've got some people stacking up.
Yeah, I hadn't realized they were stacking up. Let's jump on to the phones.